I did some training with a couple of clinical staff, and one of them said, "This is going to save me so much time." She said, "I have to put a report on a monthly basis, which normally takes me 2 to 3 days to complete." And she said, "With this particular AI, I think I can probably do it in a couple of hours." So I called everyone in. I said, "Right." I said, I've got a new plan. I gave them complete autonomy, and I suddenly realised that we know there are things on the horizon which are even more significant than AI. So you've got...
That was the brilliant Paul Fennelly, and we're going to hear more about his dream, his story on the Someday Arrival podcast. Welcome again to the Someday Arrival podcast. And whether you're just starting out as an emerging leader or you're an experienced and seasoned leader, we're here to help you to change lives, make a difference, and reach your own dream destination. I'm Darren Richards, and I'm delighted to have with me Paul Fennelly. We're going to hear much more about him, but he's someone who left school at 15 with no qualifications and had a real adventure at that stage in his life. He then went on to work for what we'd call today startups as a sales director for tech companies. He had a key turning point moment around his 40th birthday, which really helped focus on what he wants to achieve in life. And then he went into the charity world, where for 12 years, he worked in a number of different sectors, including hospices. And today, he's right still on the cutting edge of technology as he helps charities to negotiate and understand the world and the fast-paced technology that is AI. So, Paul, welcome. Where am I speaking to you now? Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in London, and thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Fantastic. Is there anything I've missed, anything you want to add to your bio as such?
Well, at 62 years old, there's quite a lot, but
Okay,
I think we've only got a little bit of time.
That's the highlights. I'm sure we can.
Yes.
I'm sure we can do a bit more. Well, tell me a bit about your story then. So this is amazing to me. So you left school at 15, and you ended up. What did you do? Where did you go? What happens if you leave school at 15?
At 15, I mean, I enjoyed school, don't get me wrong, but it was really for the social. Educationally, I was quite bright, but I wasn't really interested. The school wasn't a particularly good school either. When I left, I did a couple of little jobs, not really interested in anything, but then got to a point where I thought, you know what, I need a bigger adventure. I want to do something more with my life, and decided to just start traveling. So I saved up some money and went off to the south of France, where I wandered around sleeping on beaches for quite some time, which I thought was this sort of hippie sort of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Eventually got bored with that and got a job on a yacht going around the Mediterranean. So I went from there to just traveling the Med and seeing different cultures and thoroughly enjoying myself. It was wonderful.
And again, it sort of reminds me of kind of Leonardo DiCaprio, who's searching for this perfect beach, really. So you literally spent time sleeping on beaches. Were you working in bars? What did you do to kind of...
No, I had some cash. I had some cash to start off with, but when the cash started running out, I had to find another source. And obviously got to meet a few people down there. There was a lot of English people working on boats, got chatting to a few in the pub, and then got to hear about jobs, and ended up working on a lovely 3-masted gaff-rigged schooner.
Wow.
Which was great fun. It was in the dry dock, so it wasn't sailing it, but it was actually putting it all together. But I remember sitting there, with a fantastic view. This was in a place called Villefranche, right next to Nice. Having my cup of coffee in the morning and thinking, gosh, what a change in vista from, Denham, where I used to live.
Yeah. And then how did you go from traveling on boats and living this kind of nomadic kind of hippie lifestyle to being a sales director for a tech company? So eventually you had to buy a suit, right?
Yes. It was actually really quite interesting. When I came back to the UK, I had to get a sensible job. But I remember the first week thinking, they're going to see through me. This is, I'm a beach bum. I've been sitting on a beach for 12 years, yeah.
So I was fortunate. I was able to write a book called The Plane Parable. And in it, there are these different sections, and they all begin with a little H. So I'm going to use those H words as a generic guide for our questions, but we can meander around if we need to. And the first one is kind of, what was or is your dream? Now, obviously, we're going to talk about AI today, but I'd love to know, you said around your 40th year, your 40th birthday, that was a real soul-searching catalyst moment for you, and a moment where perhaps your someday, your dream, did come into focus in a new way. Can you tell us a bit about that journey?
Yeah. I think, like a lot of people, there was a big slice of my life which was actually more focused around my kids, and it was to provide for the kids and the family and be there for them as a father, and that was kind of a very important thing that I felt was important in life, that I should be firstly a dad and look after my kids and make sure they grow up the way they should. When I was 40 years old, and I think people go through this, and I've certainly been through it at every sort of big decade, where you do a bit of a check. Am I actually happy with what I'm doing? Is this actually giving me what I want? And at the time, I was working for a sales director for a web technology company with 4 different products that we're selling. So it's quite an exciting time. And it would have been the ideal job for me from the earlier days. But actually, I got to a point where my needs shifted, my desires were different, And actually, because the kids were getting a little bit older and actually requiring a lot less from me, I had a bit more time to think about, well, what do I want? Where do I want to be? And it was all connected to my 40th birthday. And that's when I realized that actually there's a big part of me that is an important part, which is I like to do things for people and help, which does sound a little bit crass, but it's true. I enjoy helping other people. And I thought, well, how can I use my skills and things that I've been doing in a role that does that? And of course, what came to me was fundraising. You've got to be target driven, you've got to be good at communication skills, etc. So I applied with a couple of consultancies to sort of have a chat with them about, is this possible? And one company took me on, and it was a big change. I did take a big drop in money to do.
Yeah, that happens in the charity sector. Sadly, that's the reality of the charity world.
Yes, but in myself, I was far happier with what I was doing. My efforts and energies were going towards actually giving people some help and doing something that was really important in life. And at that stage, I cut my teeth on a couple of schools projects with a consultancy, and then the consultancy saw something in me and put me into one of their biggest contracts, which was at the time St. Christopher's Hospice. And I knew nothing about hospices before that, but that's where I ended up starting working for hospices.
Imagine it's quite a emotionally taxing place to be, hospices, or is it quite a beautiful place because you see lots of goodbyes? What is it? Are there days when you go home and you're like, oh, that was heart-wrenching, that was gut-wrenching, or is it generally a place where you see people at their most human when they're, in their last moments?
Very much to the latter, I think. Hospices are incredible things. To sum it all up, it is very, very difficult. But all of the nurses that I spoke to, I asked many of them, the same question. Why is it you do this? And this was, I worked for a hospice in the US as well, and they said the same thing. Being there for someone at that point in their life is a privilege. And people are people. They might be dying, but they can be as naughty and as nice as they were throughout their life. And I met some incredible people who were dying and were facing it, and their families. I got some great stories of people. There was one in particular which is hysterical. Crystal Palace did a season for us, raising money for us, which was great. At the end of the season, they put a marquee on the pitch, and they had players' awards and all these things. And then they said, "Would you like us to put a comedy night together for you?" And I said, "Yeah, definitely." And Joe Brand is a supporter, and Sean Locke was a supporter. They both got involved, which was great.
Yeah.
And they asked me, "Oh, we'll need someone to speak at the beginning of it." And I said, "Oh, well, that's fine. Nigel Hartley, our Director of Social Care, will do it." Anyway, I came back to the hospice and spoke to Nigel. He was very nervous about it. Thought, it's a comedy night. I can't speak about death and dying at a comedy night.
Yeah,
I said, something will come. Something will come. Sure enough, 2 weeks beforehand, he was in the anniversary centre listening to some patients who were sitting chatting, and heard this guy saying, "Oh yeah, I don't know what to do. I've got no money. It's terrible. I've got these bills and I don't know how to pay them." And so Nigel said, "Look, we have a social worker that can help. Would you like to sit down and have a chat with them? You might be eligible for some benefits." He said, "Oh, lovely, fantastic." Nigel came up to me the day of the event and he said, I still don't know what to say. I said, if you do your normal stuff, it'll be absolutely fine. And don't worry, but something will come.
Mm.
He went down to the anniversary centre. The same patient was sitting there talking to the other patients and said, yeah, he said, I've just bought a new TV, 65 inch. I've got a new Xbox. Da-da. And Nigel said, well, we were helping you with your money. Have you come in with some money? He said, no, it's the deals. He said, nothing to pay till next year.
Very good. Yeah,
That's
we
a
might as
true
well. What are
story.
you going to do, eh? They're not going to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they can't come after you. You can't take it with you. They say that's very good. So you're in the hospice world. You could see out your career if you want to, in the charity world and hospices. And then this weird thing called AI came along, and
Mhm.
you thought, I need to get involved with that. And you had another career change. How long ago was that? And why AI?
I set up the agency about a year ago,
Okay.
but I did a deep dive into AI prior to that. But it was while I was looking at AI for myself personally to see what it could do for me. It occurred to me that hospices and charities alike, are not necessarily going to be early adopters,
Exactly right.
and
Yeah.
I felt that the benefits of using AI, that's the one sector that could really benefit from it, and there's a legitimate argument why they should do it, because every charity is understaffed. They all have to work with many hats,
Mm,
and in its simplest form, it's like giving someone an intern each
that's
to
right.
work for them.
That's right.
Which is a really good way of looking at AI and the chatbots, etc. That you can have someone doing some grunt work for you that you then top and tail and make sure it's correct when it goes out.
And then, so for the completely uninitiated, I know everybody's heard of ChatGPT and everybody's
Yeah,
seen some weird and wonderful images and videos. I had a little play with it in last week and made a clone of myself. And it was a
yeah,
very strange experience seeing myself say things that I'd never, obviously, I gave it a script, but it would be me. It looked like me. It
yeah,
sounded
yeah,
like me.
yeah,
I think if I'd spent another 3 hours on it, it would be indistinguishable from me.
yeah, yeah,
And yet it could say all sorts of things, and
yeah,
it was quite an unsettling thing that you just train this AI. It takes 3 minutes to train an
yes,
AI, and then it looks and sounds like you. Incredible.
yeah.
So, what other than being fun and a toy, what are the actual practical use cases, the practical uses for this in a charity environment? Having spent so long serving within charities yourself.
There are so many different types of things that can be done with AI, but I think the initial thing for most charities is really to help them with creativity. So to be able to come up with ideas, to help with reports and help with analytics. Because it's so much easier to do this stuff. You just ask it a question. You don't need to know a software. You just need to know what the outcome is that you want, and you can use the various AIs to come up with a solution to that. Simple examples of this. With some of the fundraisers that I've spoken to, there's not enough time to do the things that you need to do, and there's always a plan to do something, but to sit down and give yourself headspace to get the plan really buttoned down is sometimes one of the things that never happens, because each day changes. The minute you arrive, something new has happened and you've got to deal with that. I'm sure you're nodding
Yeah, yeah, of course.
now, so you know what I'm talking about. But actually having agents doing some of these things. So this is not just
Agent, are we talking about James Bond here? Agents?
yes. No, I mean, agents are functions of AI. So, for example, there's a great one that I've seen recently, which is called Heidi Health. And it's specifically aimed at clinical staff. So rather than actually type your notes in, you can record a meeting. It automatically generates the transcript for you. It knows that it's a medical sense and understands what might be required next from the conversation that's been had. It then gets imported into the database that they do their clinical work on. Now that saves a huge amount of time. I mean, I remember at St. Christopher's, at the end of the day, all the nurses would come back and they would spend probably 2 or 3 hours every day updating the notes, and it was literally from handwritten scrawls. It wasn't necessarily terribly in depth, but by recording this, you're getting an awful lot more information which can be then analyzed. and it's taking you a lot less time. So you get more time to be with the patient rather than actually doing the part of the job that's boring. So that's an agent, if you like. That's a service that's offered. So it's things like that that can help smooth the process and give people more time. I did some training with a thing called Notebook LM with a couple of clinical staff, and one of them said, "This is going to save me so much time." She said, "I have to put a report on a monthly basis, which normally takes me 2 to 3 days to complete." And she said, "With this particular AI, I think I can probably do it in a couple of hours." So that's 3 days or 4 days potentially saved for clinical staff, which is where the job should be, rather than doing the admin. So for me, it's about identifying where these things can help. What are the blockages for admin that cause people problems?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, the charity sector, more than any sector, desperately needs this help, because in the
Totally.
private sector, you have a lot of people and money sloshing about. In the charity sector, margin thresholds are low. You're trying to save money. You're trying to do everything on a shoestring. You're trying to maximize the money you can spend on your beneficiaries or service users. In hospices, for example, you would never want a human chatbot, or you want to look across someone and hold their hand, and you have to have a human connection to a human. That's never going to be replaced by however
No.
sophisticated AI gets. When it comes to matters of trust and humanity, that requires a human. So we're not trying to be the harbinger of death of the charity sector humans. We're just simply saying you can do more with less here, and I think that's much needed.
Good communications, and the nurses and what they do are remarkable, and it like the good example of this is one of the nurses at St Christopher's. I was always asking for stories about what they did, because it's really good and useful for people to hear what actually goes on. And she shared this story when she visited this guy who was at home, and she just started her shift, and she walked in. He was in his bed. He was quite near to the end, but perfectly lucid. And she was a bubbly Scots lash, and she said, "Oh, let's get you a bit more comfortable." And she put her arms around him, plumped up his pillows. He had some music playing, and she said, "Oh, do you fancy a dance?" And he said, "Could we?" And she picked him up out of bed and danced around the room with him, holding him up because he was very frail. The daughter came in and saw, and then sort of eked back out. About 2 or 3 weeks after he passed away, she bumped into the daughter in Sainsbury's, just in the local Sainsbury's. And she went up to the daughter and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that. It was a bit embarrassing." She said, No. She said, "What you don't know is the song you were dancing to was the song that my mother and father danced to on their wedding day."
Really? Isn't that?
And this is what goes on. And people have no idea, Now, she shouldn't have done that.
No.
Probably it was a health and safety risk, but she saw something in his eyes and realized actually he meant this and it was important, and and that could never and should never be taken away. You can't AI that. That's human interaction.
And the same goes for leadership. I've been writing a few pieces about this recently, and even for leadership, AI can give you the suggestions or recommendations, but it still takes a moral compass. It takes human ethics. It takes human judgment, your principles and your values as an organization to make those decisions. And to do that as slowly as you need to. AI is fast. It makes things happen fast. But sometimes making a difficult decision, you ought to go a bit slower sometimes. I spent my life as a young person being told to slow down. Still do. And there's something to be said for just, automate, speed up. If things can be done fast, that's great. But there's something to be said for when a decision needs to be made and it's an important one and it involves people's lives or livelihoods, then, take your time over it and make the moral call. Don't just make the efficiency call, as it were. Okay, so that's AI, and that's a really incredible new chapter in your story, and amazing to hear some of those stories. Let's move on to, so that was kind of heading, where you've been headed at various points in your life, different destinations, different dreams you've had, and changes of direction. What about heart? So what does it take, Paul? You've kind of traveled on your own, you've worked as parts of teams, you're now running your own agency, your own company. What does it take? What kind of resilience and mettle and grit does it take? And have you got any tips and habits that help you, you don't mind me saying, you're in the latter part of your career, certainly not done by any means, but in the latter part of your career. What habits and heart have you needed to keep going, and what tips can you give maybe a younger leader?
I think it's advice that I have always given to people. I think what's really important is that you do something that you're passionate about and that you care about. And it's not always easy to do that, because we all have pressures to do the things that we've got to pay the bills. And certainly the earlier part of my life, that's exactly where I was. But it's following your passion. So the change I made really was at the core of me, and it was what motivated me. My energy came back because I was now further into the depth of what I wanted to do for me. My kids, I say, follow what you love. Do what you enjoy, because everything else will come.
Is that good advice? I've heard that before, and then you think, well, there's only so many people who make it as YouTubers or footballers. Do you genuinely believe? Oh, you have done it and you've made it work. I can tell you have. But is that good advice? Do you think, to say to young people, you follow your heart? What is that?
Yeah.
Does that way lay disappointment, or have you seen it? Is it always work?
I mean, it would change. As I mentioned before, every decade I do a reevaluation, and my priorities change. So this is what kind of happened with me going into AI. It presented something new, which then gave me that excitement. You know what? This is something that I will love doing and I'll enjoy doing, and it's a remotivation. So you might make a choice to do one thing, but always review. For me, it's happened automatically every decade, and it was not conscious. It just happened every decade that I would revisit, where I was. And you get to my age as well, and unfortunately, people around you start passing away, and that makes you check as well. A good friend of mine died, and he was the best man at my wedding, yeah, very, very sad. But it did make me look again. Are you happy? Are you doing what you want to do? My son recently, he did exactly that. He'd done various jobs just to pay the bills and to get experience in the areas that he wanted to get to. He did really well at it, but he wasn't really satisfied. So he did the same thing. He swapped over to charity now. He did say to me the other day, Ray, he said, "Oh, Dad," he said, "I've done what you did. I've changed to charity. I'm doing something that I love. I'm being passionate about." And he said, "And I did it 10 years before you."
He had to get that little dig in, didn't he?
Yeah, and I said, "But do you know why I didn't do it 10 years earlier?" And he said, "No." I said, "Because I had you."
There you go. Yeah, exactly. You had to be kept.
But yeah, I it may not always work, and you may choose the wrong thing. But yeah, I think if you look at what happened with COVID, many people during COVID switched to
and they
something
became more
different.
innovative. Necessity is the mother of invention, or is it the right phrase?
Sometimes you're on the hamster wheel, and your hamster wheel of your life, and you've got so much to do. You don't really get a chance to revisit. Am I happy? And I think that was forced upon people with COVID. People were at home and not doing anything, so they did sort of think about, okay, well, what's next? Am I actually enjoying this? I'm having a walk now with the dog. It's great. I'm enjoying my life now. Maybe I could do something different.
So the habit is reevaluating or setting intervals. Could be every 10 years, could be every year, where you actually sit down and think, am I doing what I want to be doing right now?
Yeah. I think it's always a valuable question, isn't it? It's always a valuable question. And it might make certain changes, it may not necessarily be a complete change of career, but a different way of doing things, a different tact in what you're doing in your life. But I think it's important. I think for me, it's made some changes that have been significant, and I've been very happy about them. Don't get me wrong, the first couple of years when I switched to charity, the money was difficult. That was very hard. But, that did come round eventually, and but I was a lot happier, and I did feel much, much better about myself and what I was doing.
And well-being, you can be earning a lot of money, but you can have no time and no energy and be stressed and snapping at your kids and working through the night, and your spouse is a stranger and all the rest of it. So I think you do have to balance up, don't you? What it's the toll it's taking on your health as well as your mental health. And what about this kind of the heart things? We talked about habits, reevaluating, slowing down. What about heart? Because I know that you can even if you're doing something you love, even if you're doing something in the charity sector or some kind of community work, there are times when things go wrong, or it's tiring, or you want to give up. What have you had moments where
Yeah.
you're like, I'm not sure I can keep going here?
Life is, it has to have the ups and downs. I mean, otherwise, how do you know
Yeah,
things are good?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, resilience. I think one of the things that is really common for me, and I think a lot of people do it, because I did a course on NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that helped me massively to look at things slightly differently, and it's been with me for, you know, since I did the training, and it's helped me out massively in my life. But one of the things that I think happens to people is you get into the habit of bad thinking,
Mm,
and that's what you've got to catch. You know, it does become a habit if you're in a bad place for a long period of time.
mm.
It becomes a habit to think badly and to start catastrophizing, etc. But what you need to do is catch yourself and understand that actually that dialogue that's internally within your head is just dialogue, and it's, you can control that.
You
You
don't
can
have to
change
believe
that.
every thought you have.
Exactly.
Is the phrase.
Exactly.
And another one that comes to mind is that your body hears and believes everything your head says. So if you keep saying to yourself after a while, I'm a
Yeah.
loser, nothing ever goes right for me,
Yeah.
after a while your body, or even that I'm a sickly person or whatever, that after a while your body will make that real. Your
Yeah.
your brain and body are constantly trying to make real the things you're saying about yourself.
Totally.
So I'm not into this kind of toxic positivity, as it were, where you sort of just say things that aren't true if things are going terribly. But equally, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, I believe in being an optimist. There's no point in being other than an optimist, basically, because at
Mm.
least if you're an optimist, you've got a chance of hitting the target. Whereas if you don't even try, I'm obviously
Yeah.
misquoting there, but I'll find the quote afterwards. Okay, so that's leading yourself, as it were. Again, in my
Yeah.
book, we talk about leading yourself, habits, heart, heading. What about leading others? So you've had times when you've been a solopreneur, as it were.
Yeah.
In a way, you're doing that now. What about leading others? Others, again, in my book, I talk about them needing to feel heard, to feel contained and held, and to feel a sense of hope. What lessons have you learned about being in teams, either leading others or being alongside others in a team?
Yeah. Early days with St. Christopher's, we had about 14 in a team, and I remember trying to keep my head on top of everything everyone was doing, which was impossible, really. It was so I called everyone in. I said, right. I said, I've got a new plan. You are responsible for your areas. You have free reign. You have to check things via me, but you are there to develop this. And I gave them complete autonomy, but with checking with me first.
That's right.
And I suddenly realized that I then had everybody's imagination working for us. I had everyone's energy working for us. And I had a much happier team because actually they did feel they could have an impact and they could do things. I think the other thing that I did within that was I got to know people who were working for me. Years ago, I had a boss that taught me this lesson. This is, I was selling technology. I was working for Pitney Bowes, and I had a phone call when I was supposed to be doing this telesales competition, which I normally did really well at. And my boss overheard this conversation. It was me having a conversation with my ex-wife, who was very down. We just had a baby, and she was really fed up. So I got called into the office by my old boss, and he said, I couldn't help overhearing your personal phone call, Paul. And I said, I'm really sorry, Bernard, I shouldn't have done that. And he said, no. He said, what's going on? I said, well, we just had a baby and she's feeling really blue. And he's right. He said, go home. He said, go home now. He said, get some chocolates, get some flowers, and go home. So it was really the right thing to do. Now, what did Bernard get as a result of that action? He got my loyalty.
That's right.
I felt appreciated. I felt that he cared about me. And Bernard, as far as I was concerned, was a good man, and I would do what I can to do the best I could for him. And getting to know people, you can't always create those environments, but getting to know and have a good relationship with people working with you, it can give you so much. And for me, it's getting to know them really, really well, but also giving them free hand to really develop and understand that you won't necessarily have them forever. Because most people who are ambitious, who are any good, they're going to want to move on.
Yeah. Love that. Good old Bernard. As you're speaking of team there, it reminded me autonomy, mastery, and purpose have been
Mm,
identified as three massive motivators, basically. You can
yeah.
give people independence, autonomy over what they're doing. If they feel they're good at it, and if they feel it means something and it's doing something meaningful, then they're going to feel very, they're going to work hard and they're going to give it their all, really. Okay, and then let's move on to
Yeah.
kind of humility and honesty, which I believe are two of the key traits if you're going to be a long haul leader, if you're going to last in leadership. It doesn't just take resilience, it doesn't just take
Yeah.
people skills, it takes some internal qualities as well. What character traits, what personal qualities do you think a leader needs to last for the long haul, really, to last into the
Mm,
60s, their 70s, their 80s, even as someone who's keeping up with the pace of change, as you are, but
mm.
also someone who hasn't burnt themselves out.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think for me, when I felt like that, I've changed.
Mm.
And because if for longevity, you still have to have the passion. You still have to be driven by that cause or by that motivation that you are doing something that's good.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's for me is what's important. If that's not there, then I will change. I will do
Mm.
something different. Providing you're enjoying what you do and you're happy with what you're doing, and well, for me, you continually feel like you are moving forward and you are going the right direction. That's kind of my motivation.
So the last part is handover. The famous John Maxwell quote, the leadership expert, he says, "There's no success without succession." Do
Mm.
you or have you been able to hand over the reins at certain times in your life? So you've said it's really important to you to be able to, when you feel the energy waning, to make the change that you need to make. Have you
Yeah,
also been able to hand over so others can, stand on your
yeah,
shoulders, as it were?
yeah. I mean, quite often it's actually you've got to a point where the skills you have, the position you've created, needs to go on further,
Hmm.
and maybe in a direction that is not necessarily your strength.
Okay.
Um, so, the development of that and bringing people on for that is, I think, really a key factor in choosing the next person for them to develop and take it with their skills and knowledge and experience into a different place. I've certainly done that within the team. There was one guy that he was absolutely brilliant. He was just on a thing straight after uni, so he was just doing a very low paid job for us. And I knew he was getting bored and wanted to move on,
Hmm.
but I wanted to hold on to him.
Hmm.
So a position came up that he was really not qualified at all for. And I said, "Do you want this job?" And he said, "Oh, I'd love that job." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to stick my neck out." I said, "Because I know you'll
Hmm.
be cycling home tonight reading a book about how to do it."
That's right. Yeah. It's the whole thing
And
about you can teach competence, but you can't teach cultural fit and
yeah,
character and
no,
the spark and the drive and the innovative. You go. I actually heard Sam. Is it Sam Altman, the AI guy? AI Altman.
yeah, yeah,
I heard him saying exactly that. If he's given the chance to employ someone who's got the right character and drive, but not
yeah,
the competencies, or the competencies, but not necessarily a good culture fit,
yeah,
he'd go for that every time. So you're on
yeah.
you're on the same page there as some billionaire AI founders, which
But
is
sadly, not the same bank account, though.
not
But there we
quite the
go.
same bank account yet. So
Yes.
moving back to AI, is it even
Mm,
possible to look ahead? So we're talking here about longevity and the future. What will this look like? It's moving so fast, and you had your finger on the pulse really early, back when people
yeah,
didn't know what a GPT was, and all the rest of it.
yeah.
You were there, doing some info loading and preparing for a new part of your journey. What do you think in 5, 10 years time? What's this landscape going to be like? How's it going to affect us?
That's a huge question, and I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that one yet. We
Mm.
we know there are things on the horizon which are even more significant than AI. So you've got quantum computing.
Yes.
That's huge. That the
I can
processing
imagine
power.
your bedside table is full of very large, complex books because you're someone who clearly likes to see what's coming and read about it. So quantum computer
But
is these super fast computers
yes,
that
hugely
yeah.
fast processing power. They can do so much more and much, much quicker than anything we've got now. They did a test on one, and the test with the supercomputer, the best we've got now, it would take 10 septillion years to work out the solution.
Okay.
This quantum computer did it in 4 hours.
And obviously, there's a connection back to AI because they're trying to use AI to get to a finished working
Yeah,
quantum computer sooner. So it's such
yeah.
complex technology that yeah.
That's exactly it. But what we've got AGI coming around the corner, which is even more intelligent AI.
Yeah, so the AGI is the stuff that people are scared of. So this is where it becomes
Yeah,
a being or sentient or at least able to think and reason. It isn't just responding to prompts. It
yeah,
is this is artificial general intelligence.
yeah,
That's the one that people get a bit twitchy about
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's where you're like it gets smarter than us and it begins to
yeah.
are you worried about that? You're out there
Yes, I
peddling
mean, I think
AI.
everybody who goes down that rabbit hole of what will it be. I heard the guy who set up, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he set up Gemini for Google,
Google, yeah.
and he's retired. And he was interviewed, and he said on the interview, he said, if they develop a language
Mm.
and they start talking to each other, we must unplug them.
Wow. Is there an off switch though? That's the thing though.
Well, he said, if anyone says there isn't, there is.
Okay. Oh really?
So on the positive side, if we put all the medical data into AGI and
Mm.
used a quantum processor on that data, we will have solutions to many diseases,
Yeah,
etc.
of course, things that you had to rely on a human to discover at some point.
Yeah,
Louis Pasteur with his Petri dish or whatever it is,
yeah,
stumbling across innovation, a very human um, occupation, we saw it as a human discovery.
yeah,
Albert Einstein thinking and thinking and thinking until he comes up with a very beautiful, elegant formula, etc., etc. This is going to be the domain of
mhm,
more intelligent artificial beings and systems that can
yeah,
go, oh, by the way, guys, you've fed me this whole internet and I've come up with this new,
yeah,
quantum theory of everything, or I've come up with this new way of handling cancer. Are you interested in knowing the answer? It's 4 to
yeah.
2, by the way,
Yes.
for the
I think there's so many different directions that you could take this conversation in, and the
mm,
what will the impact be? Will this divide the rich and poor more, or will it
mm.
actually go the other way and give us more time to become more spiritual and think more about the nice things we want to do in life? I mean, I don't know. No one does.
So this fascinates me because I know, again, I wrote a little bit about this in my book, but the idea that even with all this technology and all the AI, at the stage it's at, we still
Mm,
have war and
mm,
famines, and we still have a lack of access to surgery and healthcare and medical advances. We're still very there's great disparity in the world. There's great discrimination. There's great
yeah.
suffering and misery. As yet, all these very, very clever systems, we're nowhere closer, it feels, to dealing with some of these really big problems. And do you think AI will give us the answers to the big? Would we have to? Are we going to be able to shut the charities down? I guess.
Yeah, again, it's as I said right at the beginning of this question, it's such a big question, and
Mm.
I think for most of this, it's really just guesswork as to what might happen. And we are such early days with it. More and more people are getting onto it and using it. But the other thing to add into this discussion is robots and robotics. I've been
Yeah, all
looking
the whole
at that.
Tesla bots and all that sort of stuff. Putting AI in a humanoid form, and it can
Yeah,
start.
yeah.
Then it really
Well,
can be not just a digital worker; it can be an actual worker.
I saw one video of showing an AI bot. Wrote two AI robots. They put some shopping down on a table in front of them with a fridge next to them. Didn't give them any instructions, and they worked out they needed to go in the fridge. They stacked the fridge up and put them all in the right place without any instruction whatsoever.
You are
And then
kidding
you
me.
hear the cost of that robot:
Oh,
£16,000 a year. Sorry, $16,000 a year.
right. Yeah, because the Tesla bot, I don't remember what it's priced at, but you could easily make an argument that if it saves you the time and the money, then it sort of pays for itself. Yeah, this is a whole other area, isn't it? When
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
start giving it arms and legs and a
yeah,
body, and it's stronger, better, faster, all the rest of it
yeah.
than a human being. So
Uh,
there are certainly obviously there's some fear around this and some risks around this, but also obviously some huge potential for the betterment of humankind at the same time.
Totally.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the kind of what AI will do in the workplace. So we talked about quantum computing and artificial general intelligence. I think what people are most worried about when they hear AI, when they see someone like you walk through the door, is here comes the guy who's going to get rid of all the jobs. Basically, he's going to, he wants an office full of computers. He doesn't want an office full of people. So, what sort of things do you think AI will be good at doing, and that will replace jobs? I actually believe that this change is an industrial revolution. In the same way we went
I
from
agree.
farms to factories,
Yeah.
I believe this is as big or will be as big as that. How do you think the world of work and charities will change? What will look and feel and seem different?
I think that's a really good question. It will have a big impact on people's roles and people's jobs. What can be done at the moment is a lot of the admin tasks. They're clearly, as I mentioned before, with the
Mm.
transcription service, they're a great advantage. But what I tend to speak to people about, because it's not just about saving money. Sometimes it's actually making you more productive.
Mm.
So where the things that I've cited, where clinical time is saved, that they got more clinical time to be with more patients, therefore doing more, maybe having more patients. So the business is going forward, or the charity in this case is going forward. Um, but equally, if you look about the business processes and saving time, if we look at fundraising, for example, if you're saving that much time and you've got a bit more creativity, you could put more events on, or you could do a different approach to corporate engagement. So it's not just to help save money; it's also to help go forward. And I think that's an important message in business too, not just with the charity sector.
And it's not the only industry, is it? You've got teaching, where teachers spend too much time on paperwork.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah,
policing. You've got, as you say, healthcare.
yeah.
A lot of businesses, there's a lot of processes and paperwork, especially with more legislation. So the more you can free the humans up to work with the humans.
I think in terms of care, that human touch, the human element is you can't replace that. Yeah.
What do you think is the best piece of advice that you've been given as a leader? Let's say AI is asking you, it's going to tell the world what the most wonderful leadership advice is, something you wish you'd known years ago or when you were starting out. What piece of advice would you want to pass on?
I do think it's actually your relationships with the people who are working for you. I think it's really, really important. It's far more enjoyable with a good relationship, and it's far more valuable with a good relationship. So yeah, and from a business context, you will have better outcomes. So I think it is people and making sure you understand how people work and what motivates them and how you encourage them. I think that's the best advice.
That's great advice. I heard someone say there's certain video games where there are what seem to be inconsequential tasks you have to do along the way. They're not part of the main game,
Mm,
but they are chat to Bob, chat to Samantha.
yeah,
And you're like,
yeah,
well, this is no. And then later on in the game, you find out they were absolutely crucial. They seem to be additional or optional. And you
yeah.
realize the whole game revolved around these inconsequential chats on the side that had nothing. And he said the same is true of life. You can just go for it and go for the money and go for the projects and go for the end goal. If you ignore the human beings, then
Yeah.
you'll realize you need those people later. That's brilliant. And what are you,
Thank you.
as we come into land, as it were, what are you currently excited about? What's next for you?
For me, it's building the business. It's getting the reputation. I've had some great successes, and people are very happy with what's going on. But I need that to become wider known so that I can help more people. Ultimately, I'm very confident when I pick up the phone and say, "Look, this will really help you." And when I leave people, they are sitting there going, "Fantastic! This is really good." One of the most used words while I'm training people on AI is wow.
Yeah, I bet.
They
Yeah.
just literally say wow, wow, wow. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm enjoying it. But it is at the root of this. I genuinely want to help hospices and other charities get ahead of this because I know it will really help. So that's my mission, if you like. That's my motivation. But I need that to grow exponentially, and I'm still really at the early days of that happening.
Do you have a website? Do people come and find you? Or?
Yes, I do. AI-strategies.co.uk. Although I have been playing with AI and developing my own website through ChatGPT, and it's really good. It's really clever. Yeah, it's absolutely. I've not put it live yet, but I will put it live at some point. I need to get it finished, really. But
it's been absolutely incredible and fascinating. Genuinely, some of these times I have interviews and sort of rattle through the questions. This time I feel like I could talk to you for hours. And it's such a fascinating area. And your insights into where it could go as well are really interesting. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. And I wish you all the best in in this next chapter.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you. And it's been a real pleasure.
And that concludes another podcast for us. The questions, as ever, were drawn from The Plain Parable, which is on Amazon. It's an audiobook, it's an ebook, it's a physical book if you want to do it the old-fashioned way. And all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us. And please do subscribe and share so others can find it as well. That helps us immensely. And until then, remember to make someday today.